So if I open up Chrome and refresh, we have go back, delete, and edit. This obviously doesn't look all too great, but we'll throw in editing first. Hands up. Doesn't really matter. We're going to do both. But like, sometimes it's good to just have a preference on what we're doing. Some of this is quite dry, I know. I apologize for that. If I can make this more interesting, feel free to let me know. Maybe if I use Bootstrap and threw some colors in, it might actually be more fun. But again, like I said, I'm not a designer. So, all right.
Chris,
Yes.
can you reduce the speed? Like, you're going so fast.
Yes.
It feels like.
Yep, I can do that. Okay. So, if we're going to do our delete request, we need to take this URL that we're creating. So this URL is /articles ID and then delete, and it's a post request. So we don't have to worry about doing any sort of GET request for this because it's not a valid request for that route. So I can pretty much copy this and open up my articles.js. This is, again, where every single route of our articles is going to live. So I'm going to create a new one. That's going to be router.post. And I'll just paste in what's here for now. And then use request response next. And this doesn't actually exist right now, so we're going to use the same syntax. We're going to use :ID. And I'm going to throw some comments of what this router or what this route is going to do. So in order to delete an article, what we first have to know is get the ID from the URL. So that's the first step. Step 1 is get the ID from the URL. Step 2 is to find the article by its ID. The third one is delete the article. And then step 4 is after we've deleted, we want to redirect them back to the articles list page. So step 4 is redirect back to the articles page. So a couple of these we've already done before. So we can actually just go back and copy that code. So we need the redirect back to the articles page, which is going to be this one right here, res.redirect articles. So step 4 is done. I'll put a check mark if I knew how to do it. That's my check mark. Okay. So we've done step 4, which means that we only have 3 more steps that we have to do. Step 1, we've also done before as well. So I can scroll up above to where we're doing this router get ID and copy the ID that's right here. So we got the ID from the URL, request params ID. Then we have to find the article by its ID, and we have to delete the article. So there's a couple different ways that we can go about doing this. There's the one way where we have it in 2 steps, like here where we find it and then we delete it. But of course, again, Mongoose gives us some shorthand syntax to make it a lot easier, where we can just say article.find by ID and delete. It's very obvious of what it's going to be doing. We find it by its ID and we delete it. And same thing, we just pass it an ID. So in this case, this is doing both step 2 and step 3 at the same time. We find it by its ID and delete it by passing it the ID in our request params. Again, I'm going to do an async because this is a promise and we need to wait for it to finish first. So I will just throw the await keyword in front of it. I'll just throw a comment at the top just because it's good to know. So this route will handle post requests for /articles/ some sort of gibberish /delete. So now if I go back into Google Chrome to test that this works, and if I refresh and there's delete article, I can actually delete a different one. So under articles, I'm going to delete the hello world. So hello world, I don't want it anymore. It was just used as a test. And we still get a issue. Let's see, why did that happen? Is having an issue on line 33, which line 33 is right here. Probably. So writer.post on articles ID delete.
Use quote from quotations, doesn't matter.
No, it shouldn't. I mean, it's just a string, right?
Yeah.
So async request params. Sorry? It shouldn't matter. We'll just refresh that. Still an issue. I think it just might be the form, maybe. Let's see. Method is post. Action is articles _ID /delete. I am running it with that. Let's see. Connected. Refresh. Delete. Still a 404. So I'm guessing that articles ID delete. All right. So let's just do a console log. Console log ID. And we'll see if when I go to that URL, that we get a console log. And we're not. So it is doing a post request to articles. Did I spell it wrong? No. Writer.post articles : that is weird. Why? Tries to do a post request /articles delete. Let me just retype this. So here we go. Who wants to tell me what's wrong with this?
The path,
Yes.
dot in front of the slash.
Well, I just don't need to include articles, right?
Okay.
Because I've already done this as a prefix. What this is actually trying to do is it's setting up /articles/articles. So I can just remove that and save. Go back, refresh. So delete article. And in the background, it probably fails. Yep. So let's see. Reference error. ID is not defined. What does it mean ID is not defined? Oh, because I'm trying to literally console log it out before we create it. Okay, let's try this one more time. Go into Hello World, click delete, and now it deletes it. So you can see that obviously the way in which we write our code matters. Everything is done the line before it, unless if you're dealing with asynchronous code. Typically everything that is written the line before, it has to run before the next one. So there was a couple of issues that I had there. Of course, this is always good to see someone else making an issue and trying to figure out what's going on. But okay. So I've set up my delete route. So now I know that I can delete an article if I were to create one. And you had mentioned that I don't have my network access for everyone to connect. So I'm going to just do that for allow from anywhere temporarily for 6 hours. So if anyone is trying to connect to my database, you should now be able to access it because I guess there's different IPs that you get assigned in the college. So now it should be, once it's done pending, it might take a bit, you should be able to connect. So, okay. So we have this article. And now maybe what's quite common is an article comes out, but things happen, things change. Nothing in life is static for the most part. So quite often, news outlets will try to release an article as quickly as possible when there's some sort of like breaking news. And then instead of creating article after article after article, every time there's an update, they'll just modify that story. So what we're going to do is make it so that we can now edit an article by going into it. So same thing under Visual Studio. I'm going to create a new route that's going to be like this delete route. But there's going to be 2 of them, and you'll see why in a second. So the first one is going to be router.get. It'll be /id /edit, and it's going to be a asynchronous route that does request, response, next. And for this route, we need a little bit of information. Same thing as before. So first one, we need to get the ID from the URL. We then need to find the article by its ID. Why do we need this? Because when we're typically editing something, we want to be able to see what its current value is before we modify it. Then, after we get it, we then want to render the edit page and pass the found article. And I guess maybe in between this, I'll do a 2.5 that says if there's no article, redirect back to the article's page. And if there is an article, step 3, then we pass it to the edit page, and that's it. So I guess I can do as step 3 and then step 4. So same thing as before. I can just copy this get the ID right here. So we have the ID. Cool, we know that this works. We then have to find an article by its ID. Well, we've already actually done that before as well. Up here, when we're getting the article to display it to the page, we do this await article find by ID, return false. Cool, I'm going to copy that. So find the article by its ID. We then also say if there's no article, we want to redirect back to the article's page. Okay, well, I did that here as well. So I'll copy this. We then also see render the edit page and pass the found article. Okay, well that's also similar to this. Except now instead of rendering the single page, we want to render the edit page. So who here has like a red flag about this code? Why? Correct. I mean, we do the exact same thing in both cases. There's only one thing that changes. The only thing that changes between these 2 routes is this one wants to display it as a detail page, and the other one wants to display it as an edit page. But we do the exact same steps. We get the ID from the URL, we find the article by its ID and return false if there's not an article, and we check if there's no article, and we basically send them back to a page that we know that works. Otherwise, we display another page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this into a separate function. So what I'm going to do is create a function up at the top. It's going to be called function find article by ID and render page. This is a very long function name, but we don't have to worry about the length of our functions. It's not a big deal. This is very explicit on what it's doing. We're going to find an article by its ID and render a page. So what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to accept a parameter of page. Reason for this is, again, the only difference between these two routes is that they use a different page. So has anyone ever heard of the term in programming called currying functions? There's also, there's a couple different ways that you can refer to it, but basically what currying functions does is you have a function that you give it parameters and then it returns a function. A little bit weird. In some languages you can make a function that returns a function, other ones not so much. But what we're going to do here is you see that we have this async. This is a function right here. This is an anonymous asynchronous function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also return an anonymous asynchronous function. So I'm going to return request res next. Actually, I'm going to put async in front of it. And then I'm going to copy this code that's right here. I'm going to do the one that has the steps just so it's easier. Okay. So this function, find by ID and render page, accepts a page property. This page property we're going to use down here under res.render. So I'm going to put in page. So what this does is you pass it a page and it will return a function that has request, response, and next used inside of it, but it can still use that page property that you passed to it before. So what I'm going to do is use this function down here. So I have router get by ID, and I'm going to replace all of this like this. So in this case, router get by ID, find article by ID and render page, and it's going to render the article single page. And then I'm going to do the same thing to this function. And do that. So now I have the exact same code that's being used in two different routes that allows me to, sorry, brain gap. So now if for some reason there was some sort of error in my logic for getting an article by an ID, I don't have to worry about replacing code in two different areas. I can now just have one function that I update, and it will both fix the get by ID and the get by ID and edit route. So now you might be wondering, okay, does this actually work? So this is the regular ID page. And if I refresh, nothing new happens, which is exactly what we want to do. So the reason, again, one more time, just to go over this, the reason why this works is it's a function that I pass a string of which file I want to render. And then at the top, it returns me back that asynchronous function that's expecting the request, response, and next function. And then because of how just in JavaScript kind of works, this page property is able to be accessed inside of this asynchronous function. Does that kind of make sense? You kind of seeing what I'm doing? I'm not having to write this twice because we're programmers. We don't like to do that. And it just kind of like cleans up our code. You can see here now that there's, you know, two different routes that are being used that are just two lines. So it's kind of handy. You don't necessarily always have to do this. It's sometimes, here's the thing that's going to be annoying about this. If for some reason there's ever different code, you now have to undo this, which is kind of the complexity of it. So it's kind of, it has benefits. You have less code that's written, but now in the future, if you ever had to do something else when you're editing or getting, it's now going to make that you're going to have to duplicate it again. So, okay. So we have to create a edit page. So edit.pug, and this will extend off of our layout. And in fact, I'm actually just going to copy the create.pug file. And in this case, we're going to say edit an article. It's also going to be method of post. We're going to have an input of type text, all this sort of stuff that we had before. But in this case, we're going to pass in the current value. So the value of this is going to be value equals article.title. The next one is value equals article.author. Excuse me. The text area is a little bit different. It doesn't have a value attribute, so it's actually in between it. So we say equals article.body, and that's it. Now when I go to the page and I click edit article, I have all of my stuff that's here before. You'll notice that this is an array. If I were to submit this, it's not going to work, but I can continually take this array and keep converting it into a string that's an array, and it'll just keep going and going. The proper way to handle this is to have multiple text boxes for different authors, or find some sort of, you could convert it into a comma separated list. But again, we're not going to worry about it. So okay, so we have our title, we have our authors, and we have our body and our submit. So now we have to handle the post request for it, because otherwise we can't modify our article. So router.post :id /edit and request, or we'll start with async, request, response, next with our arrow. And same thing, we'll kind of walk through the steps. Step 1, grab ID from the URL. Step 2, find the article. Step 3, update the article. Step 4, redirect back to the article to see it updated. So, as per usual, we've done the majority of this. Const ID equals request.params.id. We want to find the article and update it. So I'm going to do const article equals article.find by ID and update, and I'm just going to pass the request.body. And in fact, I don't even need to save it because I'm going to redirect after. So I want to do await article find by ID and update. And you'll see that I'm not doing something properly here. So find by ID and update, unlike some of the other functions that we use, wants 2 parameters passed to it. The first one is the ID of the article that we want to update. So in this case, ID. The second value is our updated values that we want to update it with. So this is going to be our request body that's coming in. Then after we find an update, we then want to redirect to the article. So we're going to do res.redirect to our /articles/ and then ID. And save that. So if I open up the form and go back, let's create a new article that's going to be why isn't it clicking? Oh, so here's something that's good. So if you have the same code that I've written, this is a good example of having collisions or having like similar naming in our code that prevents our code from actually running properly. So what's happening right now, if I open this up, you'll see that we do a get request on articles/create. And then we get this 302. So a 302 is a redirection in just, it's part of the spec of HTML. So it doesn't matter if you're using PHP, ASP.NET, Node, really anything, you can get a 301 and a 302 for a redirect. So what this is saying is we go to /articles/create, and then we get a 302, which we redirect back to the articles page. Does anyone want to take a wild guess of why we're getting redirected back to the articles page? Where have we set up redirection? So inside of our articles, we have redirection in find by ID and update, or find by ID and render page. So this, if there's no article, we return back. We also, let's do a search. So search for .redirect. So on ID and edit, once we're done, this is on a post request, we redirect. We're not doing a post request, we're just doing a get request. We then have another post request, doesn't matter. We then have another post request, doesn't matter. So the issue is coming in this find article by ID and render page. The reason why we're getting an error right now is we're actually hitting this route. So you'll see right here, we have router.get by ID. So what's happening is our router is not very smart. It's kind of like a first come, first serve. So what it's doing is it's hitting this and it's thinking that the ID is create. So then it tries to find an article by the ID of create. And it can't find it. So it just redirects back to the articles page. So what I can do to get around this is I can put my more specific route closer to the top. So right now it's hitting this one because our router.get create, and I'm going to actually copy both of these, just needs to be above this get by ID. Now, when I go to create an article, it now goes to the create page. And it's because, like I said again, it's trying to find an article with an ID of create, which of course is not valid. So then it just redirects back to the article page. So I said that I was going to create a new article so I can update the title. So new article, authors is Chris, body is temp, submit. Then I have this new article. So I'm going to edit it, and I'm going to say temp 123456, and I'm going to say updated article is the name of this article, and I'm going to click submit. Now it says updated article, temp 123456. When I click go back, scroll down, I can see the updated article is right here. So it's 8 o'clock. I'm going to give you another 10 minutes. So if you want to be here at 8:12, and then we'll just start trying to make it a little bit more pretty, and just try to clean up some of our application so that way when we're doing this in the future, we can make a little bit nicer interface for creating and editing our articles. We're going to start trying to make this just a little bit easier to look at. So I'm going to now take the time to go to Bootstrap. Go to their documentation. So the CSS, if I go to my layout, and paste the link. And then I have to copy the scripts, which I'm just going to put in HTML to Jade. Copy, paste, and tab that in. So now I have jQuery, Bootstrap, and Popper installed on my site. If I refresh, you should see that the text should change. There we go. So if we go to a news site, like I said, so New York Times, what's pretty common is to have the title with text underneath, and then there's this line break. So we can do something like that. If we went to Bootstrap's website and just went to examples, let's see what's here. Jumbotron, none of that. Loading stuff. Maybe we'll just do an album. It's kind of like this, but we won't have a thumbnail. So in order to get this code, I'm just going to inspect it. Find this, edit, copy, and paste it into here. So most of this I don't really care about. I'm going to remove the SVG that's here and keep this. So this is my basic. Ooh, I think I have message. Oh, that was just someone joining Slack. I guess because someone joined Slack that Blackboard is probably working again. Yep, it does seem up. Okay, so now inside of my archive page, instead of just having an anchor link with the paragraph tag, I'm going to paste this in. And then I'll just have a, instead of .articles, I'm going to have .row, and that will also have a .container. So to get my text in here, I'm just going to do card text equals article.title. And I'm going to change these buttons to being anchor links. So href equals /articles /article _ID. And I'm not going to worry about having the body. I'm also going to set up my edit button just because it's already here. So I'm going to do an anchor link href /articles /article _ID /edit. And then 9 minutes, I don't really care about that, but maybe I'll just set it to being, let's see, equals article.date. So if I refresh, I now have the title. If I click view, we go to the page. If I go back and click edit, we go to the edit page. So now let's try to, what is actually preferable to do is to make it so that both the creation and the editing of an article is using the same page. Again, that way you get the benefits of just modifying one file without having to modify two separate files. So how I'm going to do this is kind of similar to how I handled it in the, sorry, one sec, close these. So under the find article by ID and render page, I'm going to pass a second thing that's going to be called params. And these are params that you can pass to it optionally that will be passed in with res.render. So I'm going to use a syntax that's called the spread syntax. So this will spread any parameters that I pass to it inside of that object. Usually it's probably good to put it in front so that way you don't overwrite the article that you're trying to pass into it. And now I can scroll down. So I'm passing in the params right here as the second argument. So the first one is the page, and then the second one is parameters. So if I scroll down, I can pass a second one that says, this is the get page. So title is create an article. And the second one is going to be title is edit an article. So, okay, so that's the first one. So now I can make it, instead of rendering articles single and articles edit, I'm just going to create an articles form. Actually, no, that was the wrong one. Whoops. I don't actually need to pass anything into that one. What I do need to pass it into, though, is the create page, which is just up above here. So I'm going to pass a second parameter here that is going to be title, and that will accept edit an article. And I am messing this up. I apologize. Okay, let's just restart from the beginning. So I passed in params up here because when I'm rendering the edit page, I need to change the title saying edit an article if I want to use the same file for both creating and editing. So I pass in params of title to the edit page. If I want to pass in a title to the create page, on the get request is where I need to do it. So get on the create, title is create an article, and save that. Now, instead of using articles/edit, I'm going to use articles/form, and instead of using articles.create, I'm going to also use articles.form. So in this case, both the create and the edit page are going to be rendering a form. So instead of deleting the editing and the creating file, I'm just going to keep them there just so that way they're in the project for when you go to look at it later. But I'm going to copy it and create a new file that's called form. The reason why I do this is, again, I want both files to use the same layout. So that way, again, I can just make one change and then it's reflected on both the editing and the creating page. So H1 is going to equal the title that's being passed into it. If I go to articles, create an article, it says create an article. And if I go to edit, you'll notice something that we've now gone a little bit backwards. It's now no longer able to access that article. So what I'm going to do is in here, I'm going to say you can do a couple different ways of doing this. You can say if there's an article, so if article, then we're going to do value equals article dot title, value equals article dot authors, and value equals article dot, oh, it's text area, so just equals at the end, article dot body. I can then do an else statement where it says else, then we can just copy this and remove the values. and do that. But what I usually prefer to do is just do something simple like if no article, var article equals object. So that way we instantiate an article instance. And then we can, in this case, title, authors, and body is just going to be undefined, which is also an empty string. So now, if I refresh, is it using the correct form? If there's, oh, whoops. So if there's no article, I feel like that's not using the right form. So slash create has this. So title, author, body, submit, and that's working. And when I click edit, are we doing it on the correct one? Title is edit an article. It's a get request. Let's see if we change this to temp. So edit a temp. So right now, the article is not being passed in. Let's see. So you can do unless article. It's not doing what I wanted. The other thing that you could just do is instead of doing it in here, I'm just going to pass in on the create page. I'm going to pass in article as an empty object. And now refresh. There we go. So when I go to articles, I have my updated article that's right here. Put in some more stuff, submit. It's right here. I can then, of course, add some more stuff for it. When I go to view, we have all this stuff. Editing, this is looking correct. And deleting, of course, still works the same. Delete an article, and it deletes it. Okay. Does anyone have any questions or maybe wants to know how to do something else than what we've just done? So let's see, edit, title, example. We can submit that, and it's right here. Guess what we could do? Let's see. Let me just zoom this out so it's easier to see. Get by ID, post. I guess the last thing that we could also do is do a delete all. So that way, if for some reason we just wanted to, I don't know, we make something and then we just want to show it to someone, and then after they see it, we just want to delete everything because we don't care. So that's the last thing that we'll set up just for tonight. So at the top, I'm going to create a router.get that's going to be /delete/all. And I'm just going to make this as a GET request just so it's easier. So async request response next. And if you recall from last week when I said how the update and delete request works in Mongoose, is it will try to find the first value that matches it and then either update and delete it. However, if I want to find and delete all of them, so models that have delete one or delete many. So we can just use delete many for removing all documents matching the given filter, and we will just give it a filter that's of everything. So what I can do under delete all is say await article dot delete many, and then just give it an empty. empty object. And then I'm going to res.redirect back to the articles page. So if I go to my application and I go to articles/delete/all. So if I first, let me go to articles, show you that there's 2 right now. And I go to /delete/all, and then wipes all of them. So that way you just kind of have the blank page. This is usually really good to do in some sort of like development thing for when you're creating, say you're making something and then you go, oh no, all of this is wrong, I just need to wipe it. This is kind of handy for being able to do that. Of course, I never recommend putting this into a live site, so that way people delete everything that's on your website. But this is kind of handy to being able to do, and just shows you another function that is available to you in Mongoose. So it's just, again, it's a really short function, await article.delete many. And in here, we're not doing a whole lot with parameters, but you can do any sort of values that you want. So you could say where a title equals a specific value. So I'm going to give an example of if the title is example 1, then it will delete it. So I'm going to create a new article that's called example 1, submit it. Guessing it doesn't like that. You should not have pug tags with multiple attributes. Okay, well, whatever. So we have example 1 here. I'm going to create another example 1 and submit that. Oh, it just created example. Example 1, submit. So this is actually a good example. So I have 2 articles that are called example 1, and then I have a third one that's just called example. So if I go to /delete/all, it only deletes the articles that have that matching name. In this case, it's an exact string match, but of course you can do other stuff like operators that you've seen in SQL. You can do, if you wanted to do numbers, you could say where this number is greater than this. You could even do stuff like deleting only articles that are this old. So anything that is older than 5 days, just delete it. Basically, you can think like any sort of math or comparison that you're kind of familiar with in SQL is, of course, entirely valid to do in NoSQL. The syntax is just a little bit different, but that's mostly it. Of course, like there's always more and more that you could learn. I encourage you in your own time to, if you're interested in this, to look into it. I mean, there's tons of functions that are under Mongoose. Like, I've said this to several people. At the end of this semester, if we had every class, is 42 hours. Like this is basically 1 full week of work that you would get if you're on the job. So I can only teach you a week's worth of learning if you were in the workplace in this class. And we've already we'll lose 6 hours because of holidays. So if this does interest you, I mean, this is just surface level stuff that we're going over. There are very advanced topics that I, of course, would not be able to teach. But if you, in your own time, are not sure where you want to go to continue learning, feel free to shoot me a message and I can try to give you resources if you're wanting to continue working on this. So without that, you're free to go home. I hope you guys have a good Thanksgiving and eat lots of turkey if that's what you're going to do. If not, enjoy the day off, and I'll see you guys after reading week. So.
Make sure you open up the